Live from the TV30 studio, here is Jim Schneider.
Well, we count it a privilege to have you join us on inFocus. Good evening. Thank you for tuning in to Milwaukee's only live interactive talk show. Certainly that's issues oriented. We're so glad that you've joined us here every Monday evening live at 7 p.m. And folks, tonight we are going to be having a legislative update. It is amazing at the speed at which things are happening here in our state. And our guest tonight certainly has had the mantra of elections have consequences, and certainly we're going to see some of the fruit of that yet unfold before us tonight. Did you know that the taking of the lives of preborn babies in Madison and Milwaukee is not enough for Planned Parenthood? No, they want to also start killing babies in the womb in Sheboygan, Wisconsin as well. Did you know a public hearing is happening this week on keeping biological boys out of girls' sports? Are you aware that legislation has been introduced to for minors to be able to have vaccinations without parental authority or consent in that regard? Are you aware that legislation has been introduced to eliminate the personal conviction exemption? If you have a conviction in your heart against getting a certain vaccination, they're trying to undo that conviction exemption from our state statutes. At least legislation's been proposed for that end. Friends, we've got this and so much more. I would encourage you to have handy a notebook, a sheet of paper, or something and to write with this evening. We'll be going through a plethora of bills to keep you informed. It's our privilege to have back Julaine Appling, who is the president of Wisconsin Family Council. Julaine, good to have you here.
Good to be here. Lots to talk about.
There is much that is unfolding, and Julaine, it was not long after you were just on the last time with us a few weeks ago that horrible announcement came out that despite our state law, Planned Parenthood had announced that beginning just now 2 weeks ago to start beginning to do abortions, the preborn in Milwaukee and also in Madison.
Well, indeed they did. So I think what we're seeing, Jim, is we're approaching, rather than living under the rule of law, we're approaching living under the whim of man. Mm-hmm. And it's a very dangerous place to live. Mm-hmm. And in this case, it's life-taking, because Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin has said, look, we are above the law. We don't have to obey the law. We have protection by the DA in Milwaukee County and protection by the district attorney in Dane County. They're not coming after us, so we're just going to do this. We're just going to keep doing these, well, not keep. We're going to resume doing these abortions. So 2 weeks ago today, I was part of a pro-life rally at the Madison Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin clinic. I don't want to call it a clinic. I should call it a facility. And we saw cars coming in there. We got a report from Milwaukee that there were even lines out the door. And the number of people going in and out of the Milwaukee facility had been double. Somewhere around 20 and 25. And obviously, abortion takes the life of an unborn child intentionally, and it also it causes stress and trauma for the woman. And these Planned Parenthood has said that they are relying on some kind of interpretation from the Dane County Court, who's handling the current lawsuit filed by Attorney General Josh Kaul after the Dobbs decision came down on June 24, 2022, saying that abortion was coming back to the states. Mm-hmm. And they filed challenging our pre-Roe law, and that's what they're relying on, is that this judge said, oh, no, that doesn't affect consensual abortion. If you read the plain language of 940.04, which is our pre-Roe abortion ban, it's very clearly about abortion. Mm-hmm. So that's where we are today. Planned Parenthood has moved in that direction, and I think one thing you're going to bring up here shortly is, as you said, it's not enough for them to do Madison and Milwaukee. Yeah. Now they're going to the third facility.
Yeah, they're looking now in doing it. Matter of fact, here's the headline, and this is from wispolitics.com, but there's a headline: Planned Parenthood aiming to resume abortions in Sheboygan in face of prosecution risk.
Well, so let's make sure everybody understands. There's 3 places that Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin has an abortion facility. In fact, now there are only 3 at all abortion facilities in the state. There was another one in Milwaukee, and during this time from 2022 till now, they shuttered, and the Dennis Christensen, the abortionist, left town. So the 2 places, Madison, Milwaukee, and Sheboygan. Sheboygan is their new facility up there. That DA, shortly after the Dobbs case came down, said, I will enforce the law. Now, the DA in Dane County, Milwaukee County, and the one in Sheboygan County are all the defendants in that lawsuit I just mentioned. So originally, 2.5 weeks ago, when Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin announced they were going to begin doing these abortions, they omitted Sheboygan. And I think they actually felt like they got some pressure. Their answer was, oh, we don't have staffing. And we all were pretty sure that the reason they weren't doing it is because Joel Urmanski, who is the DA up there, had said, no, you do it, I'll prosecute you. So now they're willing to test the waters. What that will do is force a legal issue. And it may end up being something that will, well, I don't know. I'm not an attorney, so I'm not sure how they're looking at this. I don't know if it'll be helpful or not to the overall case, but it will certainly set up a point, a kind of an inflection point for DA Urmanski.
Julaine, there has been no rescinding of our 1849 law, though.
Well, there's not. There's been no.
Basically, the judge has only said, there's been this case to certainly to overturn that statute. Somebody's filed no, throw it out, and the judge saying, no, I'm not going to throw it out. I believe there's merit here. But that's all we really have.
Well, that is. And by the way, the attorney who brought the motion to dismiss was DA Urmanski. He asked the judge to dismiss the case. Back in July, she said, no, I disagree that it applies to abortion. She said it applies to feticide, which in her book, that's not abortion. So somebody asked me the other day, what do I, and we had a press conference about a week ago where the pro-life group said, we called on the DAs in Milwaukee and Madison to do your job, enforce the law. And what I said was, I think they're being very creative in their interpretation of this particular. So number one, no judge has definitively said, I'm ruling that 940.04, that pre-Roe law, unenforceable. Number two, there's been no injunction put on it, meaning there's nothing that says you can't enforce it while the court case is pending. And number three, the legislature hasn't the technical term would be revoked it by, rescinding it because of another law or just taking it, removing it from the books. There's nothing. This is Planned Parenthood being above the law. They don't want to live by the rule of law, and neither do these DAs.
You know what's interesting, and the Journal Sentinel is trying to cover the back of Janet Protasiewicz for her advocacy as she, campaigned for a Supreme Court position. And here's a headline that appeared recently: court candidates often take on hot topics. We saw her go above and beyond anything we've ever seen in a Supreme Court race in the history of the state.
Well, I'm beginning to wonder if it's not the history of America. Because I think what she's done is set a precedent for other high-level court races elsewhere in the country. Look, judges have assiduously avoided making very clear statements about how they would rule on any kind of an issue or case that could come before them. Protasiewicz tried to hide behind her values. Well, this is just my values I'm talking about. We aren't that stupid, Jim.
Yeah, right.
The average voter isn't. So, she did exactly what she wanted to do, and tragically, the Wisconsin public bought it.
So your organization, as well as others, have been calling upon individuals to call out their DAs, basically, and to do their job as a district attorney. Clearly, they're breaking the law. Our law is very clear what it said in 1849, and as a result, we need the DAs to step in and do what they're paid to do. Julaine, Milwaukee County DA, let me just give out phone numbers. And friends, if you'd like to reach out to John Chisholm's office, Milwaukee County DA, his number is 414-278-4646. Again, that's 414-278-4646. He certainly could prosecute against Planned Parenthood in violation of 940.04.
Not only could, he should.
In addition to that, Dane County DA Ismail Ozan, 608-266-4211, 608-266-4211. I've got a statement here, and matter of fact, there probably have been getting phone calls in at the Dane County District Attorney's Office, because right in bold red letters they have on their site their response to the Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. It says, every day the Dane County District Attorney's Office works tirelessly fighting for women whose bodies and privacy have been violated. As your district attorney, I have no intention of ever stopping that important work. Just think about that. I have no intention to stop a murder that's going to be taking place. There are plenty of archaic laws on the books that represent the values of days past. I have every intention of utilizing the power Dane County provides voters entrusted in me, and will use my discretion to prosecute only those crimes that keep our community safe and represent our collective values. By the way, Mr. DA, did you know that there is always a fatality in abortion? Always a fatality? Someone is always killed, and sometimes two. Then it goes on to say, if the voters want a district attorney who prosecutes women for seeking an abortion, or licensed providers who are acting in the best interest of their patients, they will need to elect someone else.
Well, first of all, when have you heard about a woman being prosecuted for an abortion? That's fear-mongering right there. That's total fear-mongering. Look, there is prosecutorial discretion. But usually when that is exercised by a DA, it's for some minor thing, not a life-taking situation. Because as you pointed out, every time an abortion happens, or nearly every time, there's a fatality. Some babies do somehow miraculously survive those abortion attempts. But generally speaking, it means the end of it, the intentional killing of an unborn child. That's what he's saying he's going to wink at and use his discretion.
And again, friends, you may contact the DA's office. Let me just go through those numbers one more time in case you missed them. Milwaukee County DA, 414-278-4646. And the Dane County DA's office is 608-266-4211. The question is, will your voice be heard? Will the DA of your county know where you stand on this particular issue? Julaine Appling with us tonight from Wisconsin Family Council. Julaine, we've got public hearings that are taking place this week, and a number of bills that are coming forth that really are attacking this issue of biological girls identifying, boys identifying as girls and participating in girls' sports and so on and so forth.
Well, we're in the time period, Jim, after Labor Day. The legislature came back. We knew that we'd be coming back full bore, and they're going to push really hard through early this next year, and then they're going to leave and they're going to go get ready for 2024 elections. So they're cramming a lot in. So we had to embrace them both. Remember that package of bills that dealt with protecting both the unborn and the women and families? Those bills all had a hearing in the Senate 2 weeks ago, I believe it was. So now we're waiting for those bills to have hearings in the Assembly. In the Senate, all four bills got sent to one committee. In the Assembly, that didn't happen. All four bills went to separate committees. So we're watching that. But on Wednesday of this week, we have hearings on a couple of things. We have a hearing on a bill that we call Help Not Harm, and it is, I believe, Assembly Bill 377. Am I correct on that, Jim? Did I remember my number right?
This one is about the sex of the participants in sports.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll take up this one. Protect women's sports. There's actually two bills on this. One covers K-12, and others cover UW system schools and tech colleges. And basically, what it says, if you're a biological boy, and they define sex as being the sex you're born with, and that is recorded on your birth certificate. Now, I'd like that stronger, but that was the best we could get right here. And it says if you're a biological male, you cannot participate in a K-12 school or a collegiate setting for our UW system schools and tech colleges. You have to participate in a male sport or athletic event, and if there's a co-ed team, all bets are off. Anybody of any sort can play on that co-ed team. But both of these bills have hearings. Now, just remember, these bills were introduced last session. Both bills made it through the Assembly. They died in the Senate. And I think the reason they died in the Senate is we got late in the session, and everybody knew the governor would veto them. Now, the governor's already on record. He's not going to sign these bills into law. But they still need to be out there. They still need to be talked about. So those public hearings happen on Wednesday as well. Okay, so here's one of them. This is the Assembly Bill 377, Wednesday, 9 a.m., room 417 North at the state capitol. And Julaine, just looking at this, and the state's legislative website has information who's
behind these bills, who's backing them, who's against them. And on this particular bill that we just talked about, AB 377, I only see one green arrow. That's your sister organization, Wisconsin Family Action, that's in favor of protecting biological girls from boys who are identifying as girls and coming into their sports program. But look at this group who are in opposition to this, fighting against this concept. American Civil Liberties Union of Wisconsin, League of Women Voters of Wisconsin. I thought they were about safe, fair elections. State Bar of Wisconsin, Wisconsin Association of Local Health Departments and Boards, Wisconsin Coalition Against Sexual Assault. Think of that. Wisconsin, WEAC. We have the Wisconsin Interscholastic Athletic Association, Wisconsin Public Health Association, Wisconsin School Social Workers Association, and Wisconsin Voices, all joining as a voice to say, we don't want to give this protection to biological girls in the locker rooms and sports, et cetera.
And what's amazing about all that lineup, and there's the one green arrow, and by the way, our sister organization is proud to be the one green arrow, but the public polling is in the face of that, Jim. Mm-hmm. Public polling shows, as the line keeps being pushed on this, that more and more people say, no, of course it's unfair for a biological male to compete in women's swimming. Look at Riley Gaines. And some of these other folks that have distinguished careers as women in a women's sport, and they fought hard through Title IX to kind of level the playing field so women could get scholarships and go to excel in their sports and get into these colleges and have distinguished careers. And people understand there is a biological advantage. Mm-hmm. I don't know if everybody's seen the picture, but once you see the picture, it's indelibly impressed on your mind of that. What was his name? Leah Thomas, remember the swimmer? Mm-hmm. And he's standing, almost 2 feet taller than the other girls than the two girls on either side of him.
The body build and everything.
Well, everything was obviously male. And so and that tells the whole story right there. Yeah. It's completely different. So these bills are out there, and they'll have the public hearings.
I'd like to share a statement from the Wisconsin LGBT Chamber, Chamber of Commerce, and here's what they say. On behalf of our nearly 700 business members from around the state, the Wisconsin LGBT Chamber of Commerce stands adamantly opposed to the recently introduced Transgender Medical Care Ban Act, is what they're calling it, legislation that would threaten Wisconsin's inclusivity and economic prosperity. The Help Not Harm Act puts this progress at risk by meddling in the private health care decisions of the transgender and non-binary individuals. It sends a detrimental message that Wisconsin is no longer the welcoming, inclusive state that we've been working diligently to become. It damages Wisconsin's reputation as a hub of innovation, creativity, and economic growth, and harms our ability to compete in the marketplace by discriminating against LGBTQ+ individuals. These restrictions would have a chilling effect and prevent Wisconsin businesses from attracting and retaining top talent who value diversity and inclusion, including skilled medical professionals who will certainly hesitate to live and work in such a hostile environment.
If our employment rests on the very small percentage of people who qualify as LGBTQ, take the whole array of the alphabet there, we're in trouble. Yeah. But I want to quickly address something in there. When you destroy remove a perfectly healthy organ of a developing young person, that is not health care. That is harm. The first rule of medical care is do no harm. Mm-hmm. This is not the answer to destroy the future of children who don't understand what's going to happen, don't understand long-term, short. They don't get all that. And so it's very, very important that I think you're talking there about the Help Not Harm bill, which would stop the...
And that's what this AB 465 is. Then this one also has a public hearing this week. And it has a companion I'm showing here, Senate Bill 480 as well. But AB 465, this is the one with the public hearing this week. And this one is saying, hey, there is no gender transition, no medical interventions for those under the age of 18. Julaine, it seems every week you're finding new lawsuits that are being established by girls who are convinced, we need to have this gender transition, needs to be affirming, as they're struggling through the whole aspect of adolescence and so forth, and felt pressured to go forth with the surgery, and now bringing action against medical providers.
This is just the tip of the iceberg. There are going to be more and more of them as more and more people become emboldened to tell their story. Look, this is this is becoming a very defining moment on this. And more people, Chloe, I always forget her last name, but she's out there telling her story as I think she's only 16 now, and how they just massacred a healthy young body. And so what that bill does is it says, and I'm going to be very honest here, Jim, we support the bill, but there's a couple things in there. There used to be a provision for a civil action for the person or guardian or somebody to bring against the medical person who would do that in violation of the law. But that was taken out, and now the determination of the law being violated rests on all the state boards that give the licenses to the various healthcare providers. So they kind of are self-governing on this, and they just lose their license for a year. Now, there has been another bill introduced by Senator Rob Hutton that puts a civil lawsuit capacity into the law regarding all of this. So they're almost like companion bills, but this is not health care. Please, I hope everybody understands this. This is not health care. This is mutilation.
There are just, this is just coming out of the woodwork, Julaine, we got many bills that were just introduced September 29th. Senate Bill 477, it's a bill here that is dealing with attendance of children at public events with nude adults. Senate Bill 478, which is intentional exposure of one's genitals. Senate Bill 479, legislation that is a civil cause of action, that you mentioned, for private or a minor injured by gender transition procedures. It's a shame that we even have to get to this point.
Well, we do have to get to this point, and this is especially the first two you mentioned, SB 477 and SB 478. What they're trying to get at is how do we curtail these drag shows? But the problem with it is that most of the drag shows don't do what these bills talk about. Between you and me and the whole world who watches this, Jim, I think we need to revisit what we mean by obscene. Because maybe obscenity needs and obscene acts need to be more closely defined. But give these folks credit. They are trying to put forward language that will begin stemming the tide, at least to protect minors. And so that they become off limits for these shows where these kids could be exposed to that.
Friends, we're bringing forth a number of pieces of legislation. Some of these we're going to look at have been introduced over the summer months. Those last three that we just mentioned were just introduced just days ago. Last week, Friday of last week, just introduced into the legislative process, and much that is taking place there. This set of bills, Julaine, kind of goes back a little bit here from the summer. It is Assembly Bill number 308 and Senate Bill number 305, and these are bills that they're kind of dealing with some same issues as what we're dealing with here, but brings up the aspect of libraries that are featuring obscene materials.
Well, basically what these bills, it says that the employees of a public library or a school library are no longer, under this bill, would no longer be exempt from prosecution if they are in possession of buying, putting on the shelves, what we would consider obscene literature for children in public libraries or in a school library. Because a lot of people don't understand this, Jim, but if you are a government employee or you're a government agency, you have all kinds of protection from the general prosecution that you and I might encounter, for instance, if we were guilty of something like that, as lay citizens, if you will.
Sure.
But these the state employees have had some real exemptions, and this is one that they're trying to take away. If you're peddling this stuff, you need to be able to be prosecuted.
Yeah. We also have the prohibition of monies being gone for this too. This is Assembly Bill 309 and Senate Bill 304.
Well, this is interesting because if you actually understand what happens in this bill, believe it or not, the state treasurer has some say in this. The state treasurer is the head of a board that handles some money that ends up in a pool, and then they give it out to school libraries. And I think it was over $30 million that was given out in the last fiscal year, in the 2-year biennium, I believe. And so we're talking serious money. What they're saying is you can get that money, but if you spend it on what would be considered obscene materials, you're liable for prosecution. So they're trying to rein it in. I'm seeing a trend here The UW were supposed to give raises, right? Robin Vos just withheld $32 million from the UW until and unless they cut DEI. And so what you're seeing is the legislature is beginning to use the power of the purse because they can't do it through Governor Evers. He'll just veto it. So they're beginning to say, okay, fine, we just aren't going to give you the money, which, okay, then that's one way to money. Well, I should put it this way simply, money speaks.
Julaine Appling with us here tonight on inFocus, covering it's a legislative update, letting you know what's going on behind sometimes closed doors, sometimes the doors are wide open, and flaunting some of these pieces of legislation. But friends, you need to know what is taking place. And let me give you a hotline number to your legislators, because as we give you these numbers, you can certainly interact with your legislator and let them know your viewpoint. And that number is 1-800-362-9472. That's the legislative hotline, 1-800-362-9472, where you can mention any one of these bills, speak with your legislative office. They may give you a phone number direct to the office, but that is your hotline to Madison. Julaine, there are other things that have come up, and it was our intent to get through some of these last time you were with us, but at least want people to be made aware of. This is Assembly Joint Resolution 50 and Senate Joint Resolution number 42, actually calling upon the state of Wisconsin to enact a Transgender Day of Remembrance in our state.
These are almost mind-boggling to me, because right now, who can forget them? They have another one of a Transgender Day of Awareness, like somehow that they're not being recognized. Jim, let's just talk bluntly about what these bills are. They are shots across the bow to all of us to say, if we as liberals control our state legislature, this is what you're going to get. Because there's not a single Republican that signed onto that bill, it was all Democrats. And so what they're trying to do is keep the issue out there, advance that LGBTQ agenda using every means they have possible. So they go out and talk about these things and introduce these. These won't get hearings, and they aren't going to get advanced, only because there's conservative majorities in both the Senate and the Assembly.
So there is an effort underway to change that. I mean, the whole matter of redistricting, and we've got legislation, even Robin Vos now has put together a bill to say, okay, well, let's do it this way instead, following the model from the state of Iowa in all of this. But there is great effort, especially with the change that's happened now with the Wisconsin Supreme Court, by a now sitting justice who made comments about us having rigged elections here in the state of Wisconsin with the current lines being drawn. That is very much the effort to try and change it from conservative to liberal.
Well, that's their whole point. So it used to be that one of the spoils of elections in Wisconsin was that the majority party got to do the legislative maps, as long as they comported with the general laws that govern that, federal and state laws, right? And there's some pretty rigid laws about that. Ours ended up going to both the U.S. Supreme Court and going to the state Supreme Court twice. And we got, I guess from the Republican standpoint, they would say they were very neutral. From the Democrat standpoint, they see them as favoring the Republicans. So when Protasewicz comes out and says, oh, all our maps are rigged, and everybody knows that, she said, then what she sent a strong signal across the bow saying, bring on the lawsuits. So she's not even on the bench a day, and we have 2 lawsuits. She got on, I think it was a Wednesday or a Thursday, and by Friday and the following Monday, we had 2 lawsuits challenging the current maps. This is all about who controls the majorities. Imagine a Wisconsin where the state Senate and the state Assembly are controlled by liberals with Tony Evers in the governor's office. What does that look like? We're talking about what that looks like. These bills that we're talking about, you're going to talk about some more about vaccine bills and taking away the personal conviction element and a number of other things that, Jim, they would do away with every single abortion law we have.
So here we have Transgender Day of Remembrance, and then also here is Assembly Joint Resolution 51 and its counter, Senate Joint Resolution number 41, that would recognize an Intersex Awareness Day in Wisconsin.
And I hope the people out that are watching this show go, what is that? Because number one, it doesn't happen very often. They act like this condition is something that shows up frequently in human beings. It doesn't. I've talked to medical people about this. It's where, there's not a real, the genitalia is not really definitive. But generally speaking, the chromosomal arrangement is definitive. Now, there's very rare cases where that happens, where that's not the case. But these are true exceptions or anomalies. And what they are is proof that we live in a fallen world and things happen that are not normal. But why do they need a day of awareness?
And I think they're trying to do that for October 26th.
Right.
And since we're on the issue, here's also Assembly Joint Resolution 61. It's companion Senate Joint Resolution 51, and that is to officially recognize the month of June as LGBTQ plus Pride Month in the state of Wisconsin.
So here's the deal with that. It did not go anywhere, but the governor took it upon himself to recognize it anyway. He issued an executive order and a proclamation declaring June in Wisconsin as LGBTQ Pride Month, ran the rainbow flag up over the state capitol, authorized that to be done over any official state building, that any place that wanted to do that. But these, again, are these shots across the bow saying elections have consequences, and, oh, by the way, here's what we would do. And that's why they want those maps changed.
Julaine, this is something I know also you have looked at, and this is Assembly Bill 366, Senate Bill 365, making a statutory right to contraception.
This is, if you go over the list of the sponsors of this bill and the authors, every single one of us is a Democrat. They want to make it a right to have this, that any federally funded, state-funded clinic has to make it available to people. That when did this become healthcare, Jim? We don't have time to go into this, but I'm telling you, abortion and contraception are two of the main reasons that we don't have workers, we don't have students to sit in our classrooms, we don't have a tax base. We're losing more people in this state every year than we are bringing in. And part of it is because we continue to say babies aren't important, we can kill them or we can contracept them away. Contraception is not a right. It is not a right. Genesis tells us that God gave Adam and Eve two things to do, right? Actually, three. Take care of things here in the garden, be fruitful and multiply, and don't eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And he wants more of us. He doesn't want people to not have babies. Yeah. This is a terrible, terrible law. It's, again, another great example of elections having consequences. And if these maps get changed, look out in 2024, because there are going to be some hot, hot races in the Assembly and the Senate.
Indeed. And this is why there are open borders coming into our country right now and bringing an influx of those here illegally. Some states are moving to allow voting privileges for them on state-related elections. And we have other countries, Julaine, as you know, that are facing what they call demographic winter, where they don't have enough in their population to reproduce, to keep their economy going, their country going, and there are going to be some very bitter pills for some nations to be swallowing in the not-too-distant future.
Well, so we have over 20 counties, Jim, right now, most of them in northern Wisconsin, but not all of them, that have their own demographic winter, meaning more people are dying every year than are being born. Those are very difficult situations to overcome. And so we have people getting married older, so by just virtue of that, they're having fewer children biologically. But many, many couples, Christians included, are just saying, no, I don't want children. And the studies that are coming out, the polls and surveys, well, they're inconvenient. They get in my way. I don't want to change my plans. Have we truly become that selfish and that self-centered as a people? Italy, Catholic country, should have a booming fertility rate, right? They are scared to death in Italy. They've been below replacement birth rate for years now and are worried about losing everything you just mentioned. This is a real economic situation. If we don't look at it from any other way, it's an economic, should be an economic, at least an alert.
Mark our words, you're going to see euthanasia on the increase. It's happening. Canada is an example that's going on right now in certain cities and states here across the United States. It's a legislative update here tonight on inFocus. And friends, we will open our phone lines. Be ready. Have your questions ready when we do that. But there are some other pieces of legislation that we need to inform you about. We talked about immunizations, for instance, and some new bills just introduced during this previous month of September that impact this topic of immunizations. For instance, I have before me right now Assembly Bill number 428. Its companion in the Senate is Senate Bill number 428. And Julaine, this would say that a minor can go against their parents' wishes, really, and vaccinations of minors can be given without parental consent. A doctor can pressure a teen to get a vaccination, and parents can say nothing about it.
That's because the people who wrote this bill believe the state is a better parent than the parents of the children. Jim, let's just be honest. This is what we're talking about, that the state knows best what's in the best interest of children. Mm-hmm. And that's why we have a parental rights bill coming out as well. If it isn't, I think it already is out, in fact. But look, young people that are still minors do not have the wisdom they need to make a choice on their medical care. Look, I find it reprehensible that the federal government already keeps information on reproductive health care from parents by law. But this kind of thing, a vaccine, young people that I think it's 16 and up can make that decision. I think that's the way that bill goes.
Yeah.
They are not equipped to make those decisions. God gave children parents who are smarter and wiser and have more life experience, who are trusted and invested by God himself, to be honest, with the responsibility for the rearing of those children and doing the things that are in their best interest. Yeah. It is not the state's role. This is a completely Democrat-authored and supported bill, another shot across the bow.
Again, it's Assembly Bill 428 and Senate Bill 428, and those have both been introduced in the month of September. But Julaine, it doesn't stop there, because virtually on the same day we're seeing other legislation introduced, which is, Assembly Bill 429. Its Senate companion is Senate Bill 442. And this would, if a person has a personal conviction against getting a certain shot, like we saw happen with COVID, the mandates that were coming down, and people would have an exemption perhaps from certain situations because of religious conviction, this would say that's out the window.
So I want to be really clear on this. Right now, state law says, related to vaccines for school children, okay, that there are 3 exemptions: medical, religious, and personal conviction. Those are the 3 statutory exemptions. This is one of the things that got really murky during COVID. Nobody really knew whether it's in the school statutes. It's not in some general applicability statute, okay? So nobody really knew if those exemptions extended to everybody in the general population who weren't enrolled in a school. So it doesn't really, on one level, it doesn't matter, because the personal conviction option, Jim, is taken 95% of the time by parents who do not want their children vaccinated in order to go to school. And that's the one, of course, they want to eliminate, because on the medical one, you have to have a medical professional sign off on it. On the religious one, they're beginning to say, oh, well, you have to have somebody in the clergy sign off saying why you would take that exemption. But on the personal conviction one, it is your personal belief, your personal conviction, that it is not in the best interest of your child to have this vaccine. This is not the first time this bill's introduced. And by the way, the last time there were some Republicans that were pushing on this. And I think it's wrong. We, by the way, most states do not have the 3 exemptions like we do. We should protect those exemptions.
Friends, we're going to open our phone lines. We're going to talk about more pieces of legislation, but I also want to give you opportunity to call in, weigh in on these issues, your questions that you have on things we've discussed, your comments on them. So our phone number here is 414-935-3030. We talked about certainly the Planned Parenthood has, in defiance, in my opinion, of our state law, that they are going to start killing preborn babies in Sheboygan, added on to what's going on in Milwaukee and what's going on in Madison, Wisconsin. The DAs in Milwaukee and Milwaukee County and Dane County, they need to be held accountable for what they are allowing in their county. It is their duty to uphold the law. Further, we're talking about some of the legislation that's coming forth to protect girls' sports in particular, biological girls from competing against biological boys. We are seeing efforts that are being made to in all kinds of settings around this country that would force such things going on. I just had a clip, read an article here of a congresswoman who is actually talking about this issue on a federal level, and say, well, just put shower curtains in then. If you don't want biological boys showering with biological girls, just put in shower curtains. Folks, it goes well beyond that issue. Also, we've just got the issue now dealing with immunizations. Should a 16 and 17-year-old be able to do it against parental authority or consent in that regard? So our phone number, 414-935-3030, 414-935-3030, 800-733-8830 is the number, 800-733-8830. Or if you want to text in your question, you can send it to 414-439-3585. Include your first name, the city that you're texting from, to 414-439-3585. Julaine, as we're waiting for response from our viewers here tonight, I want to talk about some constitutional amendments that are also been introduced. This one is dealing with AJR 60 and SJR 54, and this is giving people the right to worship. I mean, we already have that right, but this is saying, hey, you can't close churches down like we did before. Well,
interestingly, one of the things we've learned is we've got to be more specific in this day and age about what it means to have religious freedom. The beauty of a resolution that is going to go to the people for the final vote, Jim, is we bypass the governor. So in Wisconsin, to amend our state constitution, we have to pass the exact same wording in 2 consecutive legislative sessions. The one that we're talking about here, this is the first introduction of it. And this bill basically says, look, no matter whether there's a health emergency or any other kind of emergency, you don't get to shut down places of worship. That's basically all it says, out of respect for freedom of religion.
So whereas the governor, they tried doing this through just regular legislation, got vetoed.
That's right.
And so this is a chance to actually enshrine it in our Constitution.
Right, and so the next step would be it would be introduced in the next legislative session, and then it would be scheduled for a statewide ballot.
Okay. Also, we have Assembly Joint Resolution 66, and I know we've got some other ones here, too, of maybe greater importance, but let's just mention Senate Joint Resolution 63, and this deals with tax increases that the people, there has to be this supermajority, really, to pass this in the legislature.
Well, this is another attempt to bypass the governor, because when the state legislature gave the governor the budget, remember he cut out the tax cuts, and so what they're saying is, okay, fine, you're going to do that. We're going to put to the people a resolution that would require a 2/3 majority vote in both houses of the state legislature to increase taxes and cut the governor out of it. So look, the first consideration, it has to go another session.
Let's go to Kelly in Mayville this evening. Hi, Kelly, you're on the air.
Hi, I just like to say a comment, and that's it. I think a lot of the problems we're having is we're not training up our children in the way they should go, like the Bible says, and they don't know right from wrong. So, and that's a lot of the problems that we're having all the way through. So,
thank you for the comment here, Kelly. You know, Julaine, we're living in a time when you talked about our young people. Indeed, don't know God, don't know the great things that God has done. We saw that happen in Judges chapter 2, verse 10, take place there. But we are instructing children, mainly through our educational system today, that is very estranged from God.
Well, we are. We're indoctrinating and we're brainwashing in our public schools. If you look at it in the entirety of it, it's from K-4 through college. So you've got 14 years in the public schools, K-12, and then you've got 4 years of college, so a whole lot of years of indoctrination. But I don't know, Jim, if you saw it, but George Barna has been talking more and more about instilling a biblical worldview, because I think that's what Kelly was talking about, instilling a Christian and biblical worldview in young people. And here's what he said recently at a Family Research Council event. He was talking about his new book about this issue, and he said, look, parents are more interested in their academic success and the physical and psychological or emotional or mental health, if you will, of their children than they are in their being true disciples of Christ. How do you become a true disciple of Christ? You know him and you live like him because you think like him. That's developing that biblical worldview. And he said people are more interested in developing, making sure their kids are good people then disciples of Christ. Nothing wrong with success academically, having good physical health, good mental health, and being a good person. But way more important is having a biblical worldview where you see everything through the lens of Scripture and you make wise choices.
Yes.
And I think that's what Kelly's saying. And what does this go back to? This goes back to disciplined parents who intentionally parent their children to instill in them a true biblical worldview. A church can't do it all. A Christian school can't do it all. Christian camps can't do it all. They can help. Praise God, they're there and they help. But they cannot do it all, and they never absolve a parent of a parent's responsibility.
Indeed.
So you're right. I mean, all these bills we've been talking about, and by the way, these are put out by people who are the product of our culture. So I guess on some level it shouldn't surprise us that we see this, because this is how they've been taught to think.
Friends, like to get your perspective tonight on the issues we're discussing. What are your thoughts about Planned Parenthood expanding the taking of the lives of preborn children in our state? Not only Milwaukee, not only Madison, now in Sheboygan. Like to get your reaction to that, as well as where do you stand on the immunization aspect? Do you believe that we should do away with that personal conviction that parents can do to protect their children in the schools? What about the issue of minors being able to have a vaccination without the consent of their parent? Phone number tonight, 414-935-3030. That's 414-935-3030, 800-733-8830. Or text in your comment or question, 414-439-3585. Here is Ann. She said, I was not able to tune in till later. Have you discussed the Help Not Harm bill, which would have a hearing on Wednesday at noon, outlawing gender transitioning for minors? That is something that we did cover.
We did, but Ann, thank you for asking about it. I'm really glad to know that people are paying attention and that somehow you found out about it. It's an important bill. It's an important bill to talk about because it would prevent medical personnel, medical health care providers,
Right.
if you will, kind of a broad array. By the way, we have a marriage and family therapist who is a friend of ours. He said you need to add those people into that bill because they often refer teens who are struggling with gender confusion for those kinds of surgeries, for those kinds of drug, I don't like to call them procedures. I hate to call them treatments. Treatment implies we've got a problem that we're
Right,
trying to
right.
correct. This is not a problem
This
we're
is
trying to correct.
mutilation, really.
No, this is mutilation. This is castration. It's mutilation. It's horrible. And so, and I have a suggestion for you, though. If you'll just share the information that you know about this bill with the people that are in your sphere of influence, more and more people need to know that we're talking about this in Wisconsin. Other states have done this. So fine, the governor's going to veto it. We all know that. Let's force the governor to face up to what's happening here.
Friends, there is, we got legislation that's been introduced to stop this mutilation from taking place. I want to get your feedback on this. It's not a time that we can stay silent on these issues here in our state. Our phone number, 414-935-3030, toll free at 800-733-8830. Our text line, 414-439-3585. Let's mention a couple other, these would be constitutional amendment proposals. This one's in its second consideration, Assembly Joint Resolution 76, Senate Joint Resolution 71, and dealing with voter eligibility.
Well, I think this bill is all about making sure that you actually are here legally, that you are a bona fide American citizen, whether you've come in and naturalized or you're a natural-born American citizen, in order to make sure that people who have gotten here illegally are not given the right to vote. I realize to some people, they should have everything. They should be able to get driver's license, have all their kids educated, everything, you know. But on this, voting is so critical that we want to make sure that only people who are legally citizens can do this. So this is second consideration of this joint resolution, which means once it passes in this legislative session,
Which ends when?
December 31st of 2024.
Okay.
My guess is they're looking to put this on the ballot in April of 2024 or in November of 2024. Probably November of 2024, but maybe before. Because if they put it in on April and get that, and it passes, let's say, this next April, then that would go into effect for the November presidential election.
Okay.
So that would be really important. You know, our state legislature, Jim, is still trying to do some election reform. Might I remind our viewers that every single election reform bill that has been put before Tony Evers during his 5 years in office has been summarily vetoed. He has no intention of shoring up our election laws to try to curtail fraud. He's made it very clear.
Okay, here's another one, second consideration. This is Assembly Joint Resolution 77 that is also dealing with prohibiting state and local governments from using privately sourced monies or equipment in connection with the conduct of elections and specifying who may perform tasks related to the conduct of an election.
Well, this is all about the Zuckerbucks and all of that millions of dollars that flowed into Milwaukee County and Brown County and I believe Kenosha and Racine and maybe another I think there were 5 counties, maybe it was Eau Claire, in the 2022 election, 2020 election. Mm-hmm. And they brought not just money, they brought people. And they took over jobs that the municipal or county clerk should be doing relative to elections. So we allowed people who were not authorized to do election-related tasks, and we opened it up for all kinds of, who knows what kind of fraud happened. So this bill, this resolution, should be a means of curtailing that. Again, this would need to get voted on by simple majority in the Senate and the Assembly, and then it would have to be scheduled for a statewide ballot, maybe November.
Okay, so that is...
stop the money, stop the people.
Okay, and then we have one other here, one that's been introduced, and this is first consideration, Assembly Joint Resolution 78, and this requires photo ID.
And somebody's going to say, or at least I hope
we have that already?
We already have that already. So why would we want it in the Constitution? Because if you leave it in the state statute, all that has to happen is if the liberals get their new maps in 2024, and they win the majorities in the November 2024, and they take over the state legislature in January of 2025, one of the first things they'll do is take out the law that requires a photo ID. Mm-hmm. So if you put it in the Constitution, you make it much more difficult for it to be taken out, because it would have to go through 2 consecutive legislative sessions and go to the people. And they don't want that going to the people.
Right.
But so this is putting it in there. You'd have to do the same process to get it out.
Okay. Well, that, again, this first consideration, if they pass it this session, they'd have to wait for the next term to do it again, and then we, the people, would have an opportunity to vote on it. Lines are open. We're keeping the numbers on the screen, but we're going to continue otherwise informing you on some other issues. Julaine, this one is regarding the redistricting aspect, and this is one we referred to earlier, Assembly Bill 415, and this is an attempt to draw different lines in a different manner? Or how would you describe this one?
Well, I think it was an honest attempt by the Republicans to find a bipartisan solution, maybe what we might call a more neutral solution, to drawing the legislative maps. Apparently, this is a method that the state of Iowa has used successfully for a number of years now, and it involves getting people into a room, certain, Democrats, Republicans, both, and then, everybody, a certain combination of people, and they agree to the maps, and then everybody, gets to have a say, and what they end up with reflects compromise, which I'm told repeatedly means nobody ever gets all they want, but they get some of what they want. And this seemed to me to be a good faith effort. The bill was hardly out of the door, and the Democrats, rather than saying, "Oh yeah, we'll consider this," they just completely denounced it. I laughed. I really did. I thought, you guys are not interested in nonpartisan. You are interested in partisan, because what they want is the Supreme Court to draw the maps to approve the maps that they draw, and they want to make them very favorable to the Democrats.
Senate Bill number 472, Julaine, is Wisconsin's membership agreement with ERIC. It's the Electronic Registration Information Center. Well,
this should be on a lot of people's minds, and it should be something that people should be thinking seriously about. This is another attempt by the Republicans to say, all right, this system seemed to have caused some problems. Let's separate from it. So I don't even know, quite honestly, it doesn't have a whole lot of people who supported that bill as co-sponsors. I don't know that it's going to get a hearing, Jim. But I do know this. If it passes in the Senate and passes in the Assembly and it goes to the governor, he will just veto it. That doesn't mean they shouldn't try. I'm a firm believer we should try. And at least let the people know there are people thinking about these things, trying to do something about it. And this is what happens when you have a divided government, when you have a very liberal governor, Democrat, and your state legislature is controlled by pretty conservative Republicans. It's just they're at loggerheads all the time on this. Look what the governor. Well, look what the governor did on the budget. He took his veto pen and he crossed out some numbers so that a provision the Republicans put in there that would have lasted through 2024 or I guess it's 2025 now lasts for, what is it, 400 years or something like that, through 2,425, I think it is. A guaranteed built-in $325 per student increase every single year. This is where this governor lives.
Yeah. Friends, watching inFocus here tonight, and we have done a full-hour program on this ERIC system with Tom DeWeese on the Crosstalk, available at crosstalkamerica.com. We're going to just have time to squeeze in a call from Diane in Milwaukee. You're on the air, Diane.
Hello, this is Diane Garhart from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I am very, very, very grateful for what I'm seeing regarding the different assembly bills and so forth. But I'd really, really like more definite information that I can contact my assembly person or representative as to saying, I really don't appreciate people taking away our rights, our voting rights, our religious freedom rights, our gender, protection should be there. So it'd be great if we would have more concise information as to what assembly bills we need to talk to these representatives about and make more of an impact.
Great. Thank you, Diane. Julaine.
Well, I do know that if you visit wifamilyaction.org, on the top menu bar, there's a tab that says Bills We're Watching, and it has a list. I think the vast majority of the bills we talked about tonight, Jim, are on that list, and that gives you a starting point for that. And then you can contact your legislature from that. You can also contact our office, and we can help as much as possible.
Yeah, if you have specific questions on the legislation, Wisconsin Family Council, 1-888-378-7395. Diane, you call with your questions. We'll be glad to answer those. 1-888-378-7395. wifamilycouncil.org. Julaine, thanks for being back with us tonight.
Thanks, Jim.
Friends, we thank you for joining us here on TV 30's inFocus. Have a good night.